Welcome to the Podforce One podcast. I'm Miranda Devine. Today, we're joined by Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, the IRS whistleblowers who were punished for investigating Hunter Biden's tax records. They're authors of the new book, The Whistleblowers versus the Big Guy. Gary Shapley, Joe Ziegler, thank you so much for joining us on Podforce One.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, thank you, Miranda.
I wanted to congratulate you on your book. It's an amazing read and obviously a labor of love. The Whistleblowers versus the Big Guy. And it's out on sale now, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to know the nitty-gritty of the Hunter Biden story and the cover-up, which is really the bigger part, I think, the more nefarious part. And that was, of course, what ensnared you and made you lay your careers on the line to make sure that the truth came out. So you're both appearing now in your personal capacity. I know you wanted to make that clear because you're both still working for Treasury. Can you just tell us, the book is called The Whistleblowers versus the Big Guy. Who is the big guy? Gary, I'll ask you first.
Yeah, so we went round and round with this during our testimony, right? And the big guy in this refers to former President Biden.
And Joe, there was an email on Hunter Biden's laptop in which Hunter Biden's, or several emails actually, Hunter Biden's business partners referred to Joe Biden as the big guy, or they made a comment. You know, there's one famous email where they say 10% of the proceeds of a particular deal with the Chinese company would be held by H for the big guy. How did you read that?
So I guess it was multifaceted. The reason why it was important to us as a part of the investigation is because if you're holding income or if you're holding a percentage ownership for someone else, that's a nominee, and that could be taxable to that other person. So when we were looking into that email, we wanted to ask various people about that. And we were, from the prosecutor, we'll think about it, didn't really want to ask it. And that was really shedding the light on them really not wanting to fully investigate the case.
Let's go right back to the beginning of this case. And it started with you, Joe. You were looking into some porn sites and the potentially people that weren't paying tax on their proceeds on these adult sites. How did Hunter Biden's name come into that investigation?
Yeah, so normal part of my personal life, you're on Instagram, Twitter, looking at different people's photos, documenting their lives. And there were some particular photos, which it shows in the book, of some people in a hot tub with cash flowing all around them. And it started following the breadcrumbs of the case, got some bank reports. And in one of those bank reports, Hunter was allegedly paying some Russian prostitutes who were also on that social media platform. So that's what, seeing that information kind of dovetailed into the case, naturally did he file his tax returns, show he was unfiled in his returns for a couple of years. And that naturally started the investigation. So it came as a part of my normal course of being an investigator.
Big Pharma blames everyone but themselves for high prescription drug prices. The truth? Pharmaceutical companies control drug prices and keep raising them, even as Americans struggle to afford the medications they need. This year alone, they've raised prices on almost 700 drugs. Don't be fooled. Big Pharma looks out for themselves while you pay the price. Learn more at pharmareformalliance.com, paid for by Pharmaceutical Reform Alliance, Inc. Gary, how did you then get involved obviously as Joe's boss? You were, a crack investigator at the IRS with many enormous successes, big companies under your belt, billions of dollars that you've brought back into the American taxpayers' coffers. And you run what is called the SEAL Team 6, this group of the best investigators in the IRS, and Joe was one of your guys. Was this just a normal run-of-the-mill investigation, and what went so wrong with it?
So yeah, I was a supervisor just of a general purpose group. We just worked general tax and money laundering, drug stuff in Baltimore, Maryland. And then the manager that was running the international tax and financial crimes group, the SEAL Team 6, now we refer to him, left, and I was promoted into that role, and I took over that role in very beginning of January 2020. And that's the first time that I met Joe Ziegler and some of the team there. Was right at that time. So, I mean, that was the best thing that I think Joe Ziegler did on this case, right? Is that this was just a case that he was working, following the process, following the investigative steps, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, working with our federal law enforcement partners. And that's what became the problem in the end, right? Because we were following the process, we were following the same exact roadmap that we had taken on every other investigation. We were trying to follow that roadmap, but we kept getting pushed back, right? So it began like in June of 2020 with search warrants, so of physical locations, and Joe had drafted an affidavit, and we sent it up for approval. And the U.S. Attorney's Office said some of the famous statements like, "Is juice worth the squeeze? Are we going to get that approved?" And it just snowballed from there into other search warrants that didn't happen, and other investigative opportunities that we should have followed to tentacle out to see what the network really was doing there, and we just weren't allowed to do it.
The U.S. Attorney's Office was in Delaware, and the U.S. Attorney at the time was David Weiss. And I know, Joe, when you discovered that your case was going to be farmed out, and this was at the end of the Trump administration with Bill Barr as the Attorney General, when you discovered that your case was going to be farmed out to Joe Biden's home state, where everybody is beholden in that very small state to the Biden family. The Biden family really rules Delaware, or has ruled Delaware for 40 years. You were quite concerned, weren't you, that this case would go off the rails if it went into Delaware?
It was quite evident that I really didn't have a choice of where this case was going to get sent to. The decision was made that was higher than me, but at that time it was twofold. I really think that everyone has the best intentions until they don't, and I think my looking back at it now and really looking at what had happened, the Biden family lived 5 miles down from the office, or a few miles down from the office. The guest house where Hunter Biden stayed for a while, 5 miles from the office. Throughout the investigation, we heard stories about, or we heard about Joe Biden coming into the FBI office. I mean, it was really, really concerning from is this honestly the best place to work this tax investigation, when in the beginning I said it should have been DC from the onset. And that was not the way that they wanted to go.
No, I mean, you mentioned Joe Biden just dropping into that local FBI office. I mean, is that a coincidence, or is he trying to send a message? This is right when the case is being investigated against his son, and he should not know anything about it.
Even more than that, you had the politics were so strong in the District of Delaware, the state of Delaware. Even when we were going through, and we detail this in our book, for the first search warrant, the judge made an improper comment, and she had to recuse herself from reviewing that affidavit and signing off on it. So that already set us up 3 or 4 months behind, as we had to redo investigative steps. And everyone knew of the Biden family within that state because it's so small. and it's such a tight knit community. Even from and we detail it in the book. One of the FBI agents on the case had concern because he lived in the area, and the Biden family, that the sensitivity of this case. So I think that those are different things that I don't think came out in our testimony, and I don't think that came out, but we lay out in the book describing the different inside dynamics of this investigation.
Yes, that was really quite telling, that part of the book where you talk about one of these FBI agents who is moved into the area, into Wilmington with his wife and family. And he says openly that he is uncomfortable about, investigating the Bidens or executing search warrants with the Bidens because it'll kind of impact his social life. Crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you gotta. I don't think Gary or I never expected the turns that we took with this case to get to where we're at right now. I mean, we detail in the book where on Twitter, my information was doxxed. I had my driver's license that was out there, and it was very scary for me and my family. I actually was offered someone to come over to my house and protect me because they had a high concern for my safety. So because of the nature of the investigation, I mean, and the individuals involved, there was so much politics at play from both sides of the aisle that I don't think we really realized it until we came forward as whistleblowers.
And Gary, there were many investigative trails that led to Joe Biden, who at that stage was the former vice president and the future candidate for president. And every time you tried to pull on a thread, or Joe tried to pull on a thread that led to Joe Biden, you were blocked. Tell us a few of those incidents.
In addition to these search warrants that could have been of the guest house there, there were the whole Ukraine aspect, right, where there was potential FAIR violations, and we were trying to go down that route to understand the financial aspects of that entire episode. But also in search warrants, we were in electronic search warrants, we were saying, political figure number one, and Joe defined who that person was, and the prosecutors told us to remove that from the case. And you see several other areas like 10% for the big guy. You see the WhatsApp message with my father sitting right here next to me, and it's clear that he was participating in Hunter Biden's businesses. And for us not to follow those investigative paths, to look at the financials on that, it's really a abdication of our duty, and it would never happen on any other investigation. If a son had communications with the father in that manner, if there was talking about holdings for the father, we would subpoena, or we would request documents from banks. We would include those names in search warrants, and we would make sure that the money wasn't going to another party.
Gary, tell us about the time that you'd had to wait and wait because of the election, and you were told that you couldn't interview Hunter Biden or anyone involved with him until after the 2020 election, and then you went to go and interview Hunter Biden at his home in California. You were sitting outside with an FBI agent. Tell us what happened.
It's clear that because it took so long for us, December 8th, 2020, to finally do our day of action to go interview Hunter Biden and about 10 witnesses on his case, that they wanted to stop that before the election. If it had come out and become overt, would that have affected the election? Maybe, but as I said, the memorandum that discusses what you do during the lead into an election is that you can't take actions, you can't fail to take actions for the purpose of helping or hurting any candidates. And so we were not taking those actions for the sole purpose of hiding it from the American people. So that morning, Well, we were sitting out waiting to execute the interview of Hunter Biden, and it was the night previous that we received word that the Secret Service, the transition team, and others had been told about the upcoming interviews the next day, or attempted interviews the next day. And because of that, it changed to we had to sit outside the house waiting for his attorney to call us to see if he wanted to talk to us. So, of course, that didn't happen. And the first communication we received that morning when we were waiting to interview Hunter Biden was from the FBI ASAC that said that the interview was not going to happen that day. So it was a major interference on the investigation.
Yeah, and Gary, I just want to really emphasize how unusual that was. I mean, you knew that the FBI was going to communicate with Hunter Biden's Secret Service detail just so that there weren't any gun-on-gun, friendly fire sort of problems when you knocked on the door. But you were flabbergasted, weren't you, that the transition team, that Joe Biden's transition team was also informed. What business was it of theirs?
No, it was absolutely no business. I mean, these are pieces of evidence to support obstruction charges. And it even goes back to the planning part and the prosecutors, because we were going to do our day of action even earlier, right after the election. And then they gave excuses. Oh, it's a contested election, so we can't do
Right.
the interviews. And that's just nonsense. So at that time, there was no detail, right? There was no Secret Service detail. So we could have just walked up to the door and
Right.
attempted the interview. And it was just another example when you start moving all the machinations around of what happened, it's just more protecting the Bidens, protecting Hunter Biden, because as soon as he got the detail, they knew that we were going to have to do all this coordination and likely not get to it.
And I think there was one more thing. I mean, there was COVID going on at the same time, and I don't know if that was their saving grace that they could fall back on, blaming COVID. But we were in the midst of a pandemic at that point too, which I think is very important to highlight as well.
Yes, I that certainly was delayed everything, didn't it? But also it was a convenient excuse, I think, for everybody, for Joe Biden during their campaign, but also for your bosses who were trying to slow this down, and for the US Attorney, David Weiss. And Joe, I wanted to ask you about, Gary mentioned this WhatsApp message, and that's a very curious, very interesting story that you write about in your book. And I think it was August 2020, correct me if I'm wrong, but you obtained Hunter Biden's iCloud, which was, a lot of it was what we'd already found or were about to find on the laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop. But this was additional material, including encrypted messages on WhatsApp. And it's just set the scene for us. Hunter Biden, we know he's at his father's estate in Delaware, in Greenville, Delaware. I know that because there's metadata on photos on the laptop that pinpoint that Hunter Biden was there that weekend, and also Joe Biden was there and other family members. So just take us back to that moment when Hunter Biden is basically shaking down his Chinese partners by encrypted message.
Here are the arguments that I've heard. So you're referring to the message. I'm sitting here with my father and we're ready to make a deal. And I'm paraphrasing what the words were. And it says some deal that's going to be lucrative for me and my family. So I think there were multiple references to the family and to I'm sitting here with this other person who happens to be my father, Joe Biden. And
but more than just to interrupt a little bit, it's like I'm sitting here with my father and he wants to know, just like I do, where our money is. Like it's quite threatening. And then at the end he goes, and if you don't do what I want, my father and me and everyone my father knows is basically going to come after you. So it wasn't just a casual, I'm sitting with my dad. It was my dad knows what I'm doing and he's upset too.
So, and that's what I think is such an important part, because you hear from people, well, Joe Biden wasn't vice president at the time. He wasn't running for president. But so I think what this story is access to a family, access to contacts, access to a person who could be president one day, who was actually president one day. It's laying out this gamble of money to have access to this person. And it's this fear that you're setting that if you don't make this deal with me and my family, my father, it's not going to be good for you. And that's what I think is so very important with this is access to not only Hunter, but his family, his father, the administration, the prior administration, or the future administration. And that's what I think is so important. It was getting money for basically providing information, contacts, all sorts of things that you can fill in the blank there. And what I think was so important to us at the time was, and I can remember, I think it was the FBI agent who called me and we're like, holy crap, they really said this in this message. And I can remember bringing that up on our weekly call and being like, hey, we should really get the location information. If we have his iCloud, we can pinpoint where Hunter's at and we can make a determination where that essentially there could be evidence related to this case, and that could tie into a physical search warrant in the guest house. And what I think is so funny about what if we would have ended up doing a search warrant in the guest house? Can recall back, they found some I think they were top secret documents in the Biden residence I believe it was close to the area of that guest house. So imagine if 2 years earlier, 3 or 4 years earlier, we would have found those. Imagine if there were documents relating to Ukraine. That was the whole point of doing a proper investigation, was where is evidence relating to the deals that they were involved in, where are those going to be found? And I think by preventing us from doing these logical steps, it was preventing us from doing an actual investigation that we normally would do.
Yes, and look, as a sidebar, you probably know, but Robert Hur, the special counsel who was investigating Joe Biden's alleged improper handling of classified information, did find documents relating to Ukraine. So that certainly would have been pertinent if that had been part of your search warrant. And also, I mean, a few days after Hunter sent that shakedown WhatsApp message to his Chinese partners saying that he was in the same room with his father, didn't money flow to his accounts?
Absolutely. That's when the deal actually goes through. And I don't recall the amounts, but it was millions of dollars that were paid over a few years. And I believe that the deal, if they were to move forward with it, would have been over a multi-year period, tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, I think 30 million for introductions alone was one of his comments.
Yes.
And I think $5 million flowed into his accounts within a few days of that WhatsApp message. So what happened? You wanted to try and geolocate Hunter's phone to see if he really was with his father, I guess. And what was the excuse when you were told that you couldn't do that? And what was the excuse when you were told that you couldn't issue a search warrant on Hunter's on the guest house where Hunter was living?
So it was always pushing the can down the road. It was, we would bring the issue up. It would be, let's think about it. And then there was a hope that we're never going to bring it up again. And I can recall on multiple occasions, because we were having weekly phone calls, weekly team meetings at that point. Hey, what about this location data? Should we get this from the iCloud? And should we look into where he was located during when those messages were sent? So it was always pushing it. And even when, going back to what you were talking about before, 10% held by H for the big guy, that was, I'll think about it. That was, I don't know whether you should, no, it was first, no, you shouldn't ask it. Then I'll think about it. And then we never hear a response which way to go. And that was, when it happens once or twice, we don't think it's a really big deal. When it happens 30, 40, 50 times, and I think that's very clear in the book that, my gosh, these guys were just trying to investigate this case as they normally would. And every single time a roadblock's put up in front of them.
And who was the major roadblocker? Was it David Weiss, the US attorney? Did he get involved blocking and slow walking? or was it the prosecutors, particularly his top prosecutor, David Weiss's top prosecutor in Delaware, Leslie Wolf?
So yeah, and we document it not only in our congressional testimony, but in the book, that it was not only the AUSA from Delaware, Leslie Wolf, but it was also the DOJ tax prosecutors who were. I've never heard in my life for us to do a walk by that is completely covert of Hunter Biden's residence, doing a walk by to see that he actually lives there and what the situation looks like, that would have to get approval from DOJ managerial officials. I've never heard something like that in my life, and they actually did not allow us to do that. So
Yeah, Marie,
it's
and let me jump in. So, I mean, Joe was meticulous in his investigative steps, right? He ran those meetings. It wasn't we had those meetings. Joe ran those meetings. He had a running list of open action items. So it became a little bit of tension between the prosecutors and us, because FBI just seemed to kind of go along with whatever was going on. And Joe kept bringing up that, hey, well, we talked about this week. You said you think about it. Now it's the next week. What's the answer on this, right? And it would stay on that list, and then ultimately, so there's so many tasks that we had to complete. Right now, that item ends up in the bottom of the list, and it seemed like 10-20% of the things that we needed to do ended up going down the list, down the list, down the list, and then it's like we have to move on as investigators. If we're not going to be allowed to do it, we have to focus on what we can do. And it was Leslie Wolf, the AUSAs, the DOJ tax attorneys, and there was always this like gaslighting kind of, or well, we'll go talk to David Weiss without you guys here. And it was just this back and forth, and I'm not sure if David Weiss was saying no or if they never went to him, but it was just this big back and forth just to keep hiding and not letting us do what we needed to do.
Gary, was there evidence that Joe Biden was benefiting from Hunter Biden's business deals with these shady characters in Russia and China and Ukraine and Kazakhstan, et cetera, Romania? I mean, I know the little bit that I found on the laptop was that Hunter Biden was paying for, or there's an email showing him paying some bills for maintenance and upkeep on Joe Biden's house and the guest house on his property. Was there anything else that you got glimmers of?
The money was going for the family. It was always about enriching the Biden family. So if Hunter Biden slipped, Joe Biden would come along and pay whatever it was, whether it was tuition or college tuition or any other types of bills, right? So there were some bills, right, that we showed, and you've pinpointed there. But just the money flowing to the Biden family was what is what if Joe didn't have to pay tuition because Hunter Biden got paid $1 million, then that's this a similar thing. And going back to the video of Vice President Joe Biden in Ukraine saying, if you don't give me if you don't fire Viktor Shokin by the time I leave, and he looks at his watch, he's like, you're not getting the money. Like this is like a Biden family tradition almost, right? To shake down people to get exactly what you want.
And Gary, in your vast experience of running these investigations internationally, does this fit a classic pattern of influence peddling, corruption? Is this pretty standard sort of criminal enterprise?
I mean, generally, right? But it was a scale, because there aren't too many people that can say, I'm not going to give you the $40 billion if you don't do what my son was hired on this board to do, right? And that's to get rid of the prosecutor in Ukraine who was investigating Burisma, the energy company. So, yes, but the scale here and the amount of access that the family had, and it goes on about how they were getting former heads of HSI or to do certain things for them in New York. It's just generally yes, but the scale is really unprecedented.
Yeah, HSI being Homeland Security, to get visas for Chairman Yi, who was the head of the Chinese company that was paying Hunter and his family tens of millions of dollars. Can I ask you also, Gary, when did you start realizing that this was such a problem and that the people up the line from you were not helping you allow Joe to do his job? When did you decide to become a whistleblower?